Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Data Standard Audio Experience. I'm here today with Daniel Pickett, the Chief Data and Technology Officer at FreightWaves. And today we're going to be speaking more about geospatial data. So, welcome to the show, Daniel. I'm very excited to discuss with you just more about the work that you're doing.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and could you tell the audience just more about what you do and just share more about your background?
Yeah, absolutely. So like you said, my name is Daniel Pickett, and I lead the data science and as well as the software engineering teams at FreightWaves. I started my career really in software development, engineering, got into data science, and really mostly worked in financial services before coming to work in transportation and supply chain. And really what attracted me here is that FreightWaves was trying to build a futures market around trucking, and just there's no pricing transparency, and these are problems that largely have been solved in the financial world, where generally a stock price is a stock price, nationwide or internationally. Bonds similar, there's a structure to it. Transportation is all over the board. It is the wild west of what people are charging and earning to move goods around the country, and I just found that challenge really fascinating. So when I heard about FreightWaves here in my hometown of Chattanooga, Tennessee, I had to jump on board about 4 years ago.
No, that's awesome to hear. And it's clear that you're very passionate about the field that you're working in. So I'm excited to just hear more about the things that you're doing and the projects that you're working on. And
Yeah.
specifically, I wanted to talk about geospatial data in this first question. How would you define what geospatial data is from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, the simplest definition is that it is data about physical location. So generally, we think geospatial data, we think latitude, longitude, and those still are the basics. Where on Earth are we talking about? But there's some other really interesting dimensions when you talk about transportation, supply chain. Also, like elevation. What floor is it on? What building is it in? And we have these addresses. Maybe on a street, maybe you're in an apartment building or an office complex somewhere. And addresses, they get the job done because whoever's doing local delivery kind of has some know-how. But they're not, especially in multi-tenant buildings, addresses are not great and they're not consistent. And so, there's a lot of people trying to solve those challenges, where in transportation, there's one address for a giant warehouse, but 3 or 10 different companies take up some of the loading dock doors there. And how do you slice and dice that? How do you break that building up? FreightWaves, we're doing some of it with our geospatial data. There's some other really interesting innovators in geospatial right now. We've worked with a company called SafeGraph, who they've put out a new address standard to get not only your geospatial location, but also your building floor, who is the current tenant information kind of cataloged in a way. So there's a lot of other dimensions to it, in addition to where on Earth is it? How high is it? What room is it in? What floor is it on? If it's a truck, how fast is it going? Is it heading north, south? Is it loaded? Is it unloaded? So there can be metadata about a geospatial position that's also really interesting too.
Yeah, definitely. Super interesting work that you're doing. And I wanted to talk about what are some ways that FreightWaves are using data specifically to innovate the tech space, since, data science and a lot of work with data right now is huge in the industry, and a lot of it is also newer. So what are you kind of working on today?
Yeah, great question. So, I think the big thing everybody wants to know is, how much should I get paid, or how much should I pay to put something on a truck or a train or an airplane or a ship and move it from A to B? And then you add up lots of those little questions, say, okay, I want to move it from inland China to Chicago, Illinois. There's going to be multiple legs. You're going to have to answer that question a lot of times. So pricing is kind of the number one question on everybody's mind. And now I think we've found some other interesting data sources that tell you about pricing when you don't have all of the information, every price that possibly happened yesterday. There are other indications, such as flows, and how many trucks flowed into a city, how many flowed out, how many empty rail cars flowed in, how many full rail cars flowed out. And a lot of that balance of equipment movement information can tell you quite a bit about where prices are headed today, tomorrow, a week or 2 weeks out sometimes. Maritime is a great indicator of what's about to happen in trucking. So much of what gets hauled on a truck or on a rail car first arrives on a ship. And those have a 2-week lead time to leave leave Asia on the way to LA, about a 4-week lead time to get to the East Coast. So you can see how many sailings are happening. You can see how many things are clearing the port in those corrugated metal containers you see on ships and trains, and sometimes trucks. How many of those containers are coming in tells us a lot about how much freight there's going to be on the rails, on the trucks. And so trying to look upstream of where people have traditionally looked is kind of that's what I think we do exceptionally well at FreightWaves, and why I think we're able to give people a more accurate number than maybe what they're used to.
Yeah, definitely. And that's so great to hear. I wanted to talk about data and just the data gathering in general. That's always been a kind of a difficult challenge that a lot of people working in the data space have talked to me about on this show. Just being able to gather the correct data, quality data. And so, from your perspective, is it ever difficult to gather historical data for any of your analysis?
So it certainly is sometimes, and I would say, yes and no. Sometimes if it's transactional information, that we tend to keep that for a pretty long time, because most firms either actually like to go back and do their own analytics, or they fantasize that one day they will, and so they just hang on to the records for 7 or 10 years or 20 years or whatever it is. And like you said, that history is so important, because if you're building time series models, which we are, you want to predict the volume or the rate through time. The more history you have, the better, but you really need probably 3 years to reliably kind of detect a seasonality curve, figure out, are we trending up, trending down? Did the trend change halfway through this time period? So more the better. But you're right in that sometimes history is hard to get. And some of these newer data sets that we're collecting are what people refer to as exhaust data. And I don't mean like exhaust comes out the tailpipe of a truck. I mean, it's kind of considered a byproduct of doing business. And I'll give you an example. One of the things we monitor is called acceptance and rejection. So just like when an airline tries to fill its airplane or a hotel tries to fill its hotel, sometimes they book more rooms or more seats than the plane or hotel can actually hold. Same thing happens in trucking. People commit to more loads per week than they could possibly do with their fleet. And in peak times, you'll see, we'll give a $200 voucher for someone willing to fly to San Francisco tomorrow morning instead. We'll put you up at a nicer hotel 2 blocks down. And that kind of thing happens in trucking too. So we call it a rejection, when essentially, Procter & Gamble says, hey, Schneider, I want you to take this load for me to the Walmart distribution center. And Schneider says, sorry, can't do it. All my trucks are I don't have one in the area, one broke down, I won't have one available at the time you need. And so those rejections are kind of something that not a lot of people were keeping count of how many accepts and rejects they had per day. We started collecting that data in 2017, and really now we're getting that 3 years of history where we can say, I can see trends, and now I can, predict things and tell you more reliably what's going to happen with volume and rates and the availability and difficulty of getting a truck. It depends on the data. I know that's a cop-out answer, but it totally does. And I think those data sets that are really interesting, but are kind of byproducts that people call exhaust data, those are the ones where you have to start collecting now. I think it was Marissa Mayer. There's a quote attributed to her, of course, the Google and then Yahoo executive. She said, the best time to start collecting data is yesterday. And that's absolutely true, because the more you have, some of these more advanced techniques like deep learning, like machine learning, the more data you have, the more accurate it's going to be. And with that time series data, you're right. Sometimes it disappears if you don't save it.
Yeah, great insight there, and just a lot of things to really think about with the moving parts of the work that you do today. I wanted to talk about any major challenges that you've also seen with your line of work. In the data collection process, there's a lot of challenges that come with just the industry in general. How have you tackled the data collection process thus far?
Yeah, FreightWaves, it might be fair to say we pioneered the model, and there's a few others have done it, but we really kind of started as a data and analytics provider, but also as a news and content organization. And that media arm has really made it a lot easier for name recognition, for companies saying, I will give you data, but I want this data set to be named after me. When you talk about it, I want my name set every time. You said, okay. And so, through the media arm, we've gotten access to Freightos is a really innovative company that's doing some maritime and air cargo kind of containerized pricing and volume measurement. They said, we will give you this containerized data, but when you talk about it in media, we want it to be the Freightos Baltic Index. And we do. And we have that data set in our platform, and people look at it to see what are prices, what are volumes look like coming into LA, coming into Savannah, because that tells me a lot about what's going to happen on railroads and trucks. And so, that's kind of one innovative way we've done it. A more challenging one has been when you try to get your customers or lots of different people to all contribute data, but then you want to kind of mix it, anonymize it, and send it back to them. Everybody's attitude is they kind of want nobody in the room to have any clothes except for them. It's like, I want to see everybody else's stuff, but I don't want my stuff to flow out to them. It's not exactly how it works that way. When everybody's home is on Zillow, you can look at anybody else's home. Now, we do go through a lot of processes to make sure that, anybody who gives us data, it is not being exposed with their name attached. We're doing things like averaging numbers and putting them into models so we give people an output that is not any one person's data being exposed. But certainly there is that you do have to get people comfortable with your systems and your processes and your ability to keep their confidential information confidential and not expose them to competitive intelligence kind of threats. That I would say that's another big challenge. A third huge challenge is with some of this alternative data. We're collecting data from a lot of companies that have never given it away before, and everybody says, "What's it worth?" And data, it's kind of like somebody says it's like unrefined oil. Well, it kind of depends. How much history do you have? Is it pretty clean, or am I going to have to do a lot of the cleaning myself? Is it dime a dozen? Do lots of other people have this data, or are you the only party, or are you the largest party that has this kind of data? So those are a lot of the questions we try to think about as we go through, what is a data set worth? And so it's typically, hey, let's get an NDA in place, give me a sample, we'll evaluate the sample, and hopefully that sample is randomly drawn and reflective of the broader quality. We've been in a few situations where we got a pristine sample and we said, okay, we'll write you a check for that data set. And then the whole data set is, this sample seems to be cherry picked. And it happens. But I would say that is the third and final, big challenge of data collection is just, what is this data worth? Because in some cases we've bought data, we found it to be, hey, we got a good deal. And the vendor comes back and says, I want more money. And so, then you're also trying to balance, okay, I need multiple suppliers for any one type so that, nobody, where possible, so that nobody can really pull me around when it comes to availability and pricing.
Yeah, definitely. Great insight about some of the challenges that you have right now with your line of work. And thank you for sharing, because I think not enough people talk about the challenges that they're facing within the industry. So it's great to hear just, other people's perspectives working in the data space and just the things that they're working on and the challenges that they might be facing. So thank you so much for sharing. And I want to say thank you so much for being on the show today, Daniel. It was so great to have you. We're building a community where everyone can just network and collaborate with each other in the data space. So what's something that you're trying to look for or that we can help you with?
The things are changing so fast that, it is difficult to do your job, but also stay abreast of some of the new developments. So I think being able to learn from other things other people have done, people in the community kind of celebrating each other's really, really innovative work is so huge. Our Slack channel, our data and engineering Slack channels are full of just examples somebody read about, look at what this team did. This is so cool. We should do something like this. So, I think it's really good that we are now talking about building up a practice of data practitioners, whether that be scientists or engineers or researchers or database administrators, whatever it is. I would like to see us develop that community kind of the way that there is a medical community, there is a legal community, because I think we can do a lot to support each other, to knowledge share with each other and share best practices. Because at the end of the day, in some cases we're competing against each other, but for the most part, the people that are in the data space, we're at this to find the truth. So helping each other get better at that, I'm all about.
Yeah, perfect. And where is somewhere online that everyone can find you?
You can absolutely find us at FreightWaves. FreightWaves.com, freightwaves.com. I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter. You can probably find a picture of me somewhere on the FreightWaves website. But we'd love to have anybody reach out and talk data. Always down for that.
Yeah, definitely. And thank you so much. And to our audience, for more information on the data standard, you can find us at www.datastandard.io, as well as on our LinkedIn and YouTube channel. Thanks so much, Daniel, for joining me and just to speak more about geospatial data and the challenges that you have with having data, gathering data, working with it. So thanks so much for sharing your perspective on everything.
Thank you.